And so should the British, I mean, Cameron and all the people.
Well, I mean, everybody is involved, the Russians too, but I think the dilemma that the international community had in Syria was, on one hand, you had an authoritarian but secular regime, and on the other hand, you have an opposition that was described as pro-democratic but religious. And you've been a very passionate advocate of both freedom and democracy. And I understand my question is going to sound very difficult. It's a very tough choice. But if you have to choose between the promise of democracy and a potential loss of secularism, what would you choose?
Well, I think that doesn't necessarily need to be the choice. I mean, I think...
But it is in Syria, it was.
Well, I think you're right. And I think I would choose the secularity because what one had under, say, Saddam Hussein was a secular construct in which, you know, you didn't have this fighting between Sunni and Shiites. And that, to some extent, was a form of democracy. I mean...
well, at least less people were dying on a daily basis. I mean, it's not...
Well, I think that that's true, but what you have now, I think, is worse. I mean, I think... you see, they did not enter Iraq to bring democracy. It was really... because of weapons of mass destruction, and we know that was a lie now. That was not correct.
But I mean,
so
in Syria, you can also question the motives of the Obama administration, because I mean, obviously they say they supported democratic uprising by sending their weapons.
I think democracy is incompatible with Islam, because for democracy you need the separation of church and state. I mean, the Jefferson, the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, particularly Madison, recognized that. So you need that, and in Christianity you can get somewhere, but you cannot get there in Islam. And so my view, and I think, is that if you have a strong Islamic construct which is influential, then democracy is essentially impossible.
Mr. Kroto, President Assad, whatever you think of him, again, he has been able for some years to provide this balance between, you know, religious ideology that obviously is very prevalent in his country and that separation of church and state. And yet that balance, you know, the very popular idea in the West that, you know, everything has to be sacrificed for the sake of democracy, and that balance was lost. And I don't think that we can even get to the point that we were in Syria, let's say, 3 years ago. Something like that would have been a great achievement if we can reinstitute that order, you know, through some peace talks or whatever.
Well, I think it's a problem. And I don't think the problem will go away until religiosity becomes much weaker. And I don't see that happening. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, what I said is, you know, democracy, yes, although it's very weak in the face of powerful philosophical, psychological constructs. And, you know, if you say, okay, I've got the choice of what we have now in the Middle East or Assad and Saddam Hussein, I think some people will say it was probably a bit better with Saddam Hussein. Then we see the brutality, which is at least as bad.
Well, I think it's much worse. I mean, at least Assad and Hussein weren't decapitating people on the street.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point that I would go address. And so, you know, you're asking me to give a choice between the things that are impossible, it seems to me, within a powerful, mystical, socio and economical environment of the mind. And I don't think, you know, when people say, when the West says we're bringing democracy to